"I'm my mom's lawyer," he declared, his voice steady despite the nervous quiver in his chest, a fire in his words that silenced the room. The small courtroom in Jackson, Mississippi, crackled with tension. The wooden benches groaned under the weight of onlookers, their hushed whispers weaving a restless hum that reverberated off the high, paneled ceilings. At the heart of this charged atmosphere stood a 10-year-old boy, his deep brown skin glowing under the harsh fluorescent lights, his eyes burning with a fierce determination that belied his age. His name was Jamal Carter, and he was about to do something no one in that room, or perhaps any courtroom in the state, had ever witnessed. Jamal's mother, Letitia Carter, sat at the defendant's table, her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles strained against her skin. A single mother of 3, she juggled 2 grueling jobs, waitressing at a diner and cleaning houses to keep her family afloat. Her tired eyes darted nervously between her son and the judge, a stern, silver-haired man named Judge Harlan Brooks, whose reputation for unyielding rulings preceded him like a storm cloud. Letitia faced eviction from their modest apartment, a case brought by their landlord, Mr. Grayson, who claimed she hadn't paid rent for 3 months. The truth was a tangled web of neglect and hardship, but the law often turned a blind eye to such complexities. Jamal stood tall beside his mother, dressed in an oversized suit jacket borrowed from his uncle, the sleeves slightly too long but neatly rolled at the cuffs. His hair was meticulously braided, a testament to his mother's care despite their struggles. In his hands, he clutched a worn spiral notebook, its pages brimming with handwritten notes scrawled in blue ink. The bailiff, a burly man with a skeptical frown, had tried to usher him to the gallery with the other spectators, but Jamal had planted his feet firmly. "I'm my mom's lawyer," he declared, his voice steady despite the nervous quiver in his chest, a fire in his words that silenced the room. The courtroom fell into a stunned hush. Judge Brooks peered over his wire-rimmed glasses, his bushy eyebrows arching like twin question marks. "Young man, this is a court of law, not a playground," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You cannot represent anyone here." Jamal didn't flinch. His small frame seemed to grow taller as he met the judge's gaze. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I know my mom's story better than anyone. I've studied the law, and I'm here to speak for her. She can't afford a lawyer, and I won't let her lose our home." A ripple of gasps spread through the onlookers. Mr. Grayson's attorney, Mr. Hargrove, a slick man in a tailored pinstripe suit, smirked from the plaintiff's table, adjusting his silk tie with a flourish. "This is absurd," he scoffed, his voice dripping with condescension. "A child playing lawyer? This case is straightforward. The defendant owes 3 months' rent. The law is clear." Judge Brooks tapped his gavel lightly, the sharp sound cutting through the murmurs. His eyes lingered on Jamal, studying the boy's unwavering resolve, the way his small hands gripped the notebook like a lifeline. "Son, do you understand the gravity of this?" he asked. "Representing someone in court requires knowledge of legal procedures, evidence, and statutes. What makes you think you can do this?" Jamal straightened his shoulders, his voice steady but earnest. "I've been reading, Your Honor. I found books at the library, landlord-tenant law, Mississippi statutes, even some case law. I know about the implied warranty of habitability and the landlord's duty to maintain the property. Mr. Grayson didn't fix the leaks or the heat, and that's why my mom withheld rent. I can prove it." The judge's stern expression softened just a fraction, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. He leaned back in his high-backed chair, his fingers steepled thoughtfully. "This is highly unusual," he said, his tone measured, "but I'll allow you to speak. For now, proceed with caution, young man." Jamal's journey to this extraordinary moment began 3 months earlier when the first eviction notice arrived, taped to their apartment door like a cruel taunt. Letitia had been working relentless overtime shifts at the diner, her feet aching from long hours, and cleaning houses on weekends, her hands raw from scrubbing. But the apartment's relentless issues, leaky pipes that stained the ceiling, a broken heater that left them shivering through winter nights, lights and a faulty electrical system that flickered ominously had turned their home into a daily battle. When she withheld rent to force repairs, hoping to push Mr. Grayson to act, he responded with the cold finality of an eviction notice. Jamal, the eldest of his siblings at 10 years old, saw the weight of despair crushing his mother. Late at night, when she thought the kids were asleep, her soft sobs and whispered prayers drifted through the thin walls of their cramped apartment. The sound broke Jamal's heart. He couldn't stand seeing her so defeated, her shoulders slumped under the burden of bills and broken promises. A bright student, despite the challenges of their rough neighborhood, Jamal excelled in school, particularly in debate. His teacher, Mrs. Thompson, a woman with a sharp mind and a kind heart, had noticed his knack for articulating arguments and encouraged him to join the school's mock trial club. There, in the school gym, surrounded by classmates playing judges and attorneys, Jamal discovered a love for arguing cases, even if they were just pretend scenarios about stolen bikes or schoolyard disputes. One evening, while Letitia worked a double shift, Jamal pedaled his rusty bike through the humid Mississippi dusk to the public library. The librarian, Miss Clara, a warm woman with silver-streaked hair and a passion for nurturing curious minds, spotted him hunched over a towering stack of legal books. "What's a young man like you doing with all these law books?" she asked, her voice gentle but tinged with curiosity. Jamal hesitated, then poured out his mother's plight, the eviction notice, the broken apartment, and the landlord's indifference. Miss Clara's eyes softened with empathy, and she spent hours guiding him through the library's resources. She pulled books on tenant rights, showed him free legal aid websites on the library's ancient computers, and even dug up archived court cases from dusty microfiche records. Jamal devoured it all, spending every spare moment studying, his notebook filled with terms like constructive eviction, retaliatory eviction, and implied warranty of habitability. He didn't understand every nuance, but he grasped enough to know his mother had a case and that he could fight for her. Back in the courtroom, Jamal opened his notebook, its pages crinkled from constant use. "Your Honor, Mississippi Code Section 8-8-11 says a landlord must keep the property in a safe and habitable condition. Mr. Grayson didn't do that. The heat was out for 2 months last winter. We had to use space heaters and one caught fire, nearly burning our apartment. My mom sent letters asking for repairs, but he ignored them. That's why she stopped paying rent." Mr. Hargrove stood, his smirk replaced by a scowl. "Objection, Your Honor. This boy is making claims without evidence. Where are these so-called letters?" Jamal reached into his backpack and pulled out a stack of papers, meticulously organized with colorful sticky notes. "Here, Your Honor, copies of the letters my mom sent with dates and proof of mailing. I also have photos of the leaks, the fire damage, and the broken heater." The bailiff, still looking skeptical, took the documents and handed them to the judge. Judge Brooks flipped through the pages, his face unreadable. The photos showed water-stained ceilings with peeling paint, a charred electrical outlet where the space heater had sparked, and a plastic bucket catching steady drips from a rusted pipe. The letters, written in Letitia's deliberate handwriting, detailed every issue, each one a plea for repairs that went unanswered. As Jamal continued, his voice grew stronger, fueled by weeks of preparation and a deep love for his family. He cited cases he'd found in the library, like Smith versus Jones, where a Mississippi court ruled that tenants could withhold rent if the landlord failed to maintain the property. He stumbled over legal terms like breach of covenant and mitigation of damages, but his passion held the room captive. The onlookers, neighbors, community activists, and curious strangers leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the boy who dared to challenge the system. Mr. Hargrove tried to counter, his voice sharp with frustration. "Your Honor, the defendant's failure to pay rent voids any claims about habitability. She breached the lease first, and that's the only issue here." Jamal was ready. "Your Honor, Mr. Grayson's own lease agreement says he's responsible for repairs. He breached that contract first. My mom followed the law by notifying him in writing multiple times. She even offered to pay the rent into an escrow account until the repairs were done, but he refused to discuss it." Judge Brooks raised a hand, silencing both sides. His eyes narrowed as he studied Jamal's notebook, the photos, photos and the letters. "Young man, you've done your homework," he said, his voice carrying a hint of respect. "But I need to hear from the landlord. Mr. Hargrove, take the stand." Mr. Hargrove, a middle-aged man with a perpetual frown and a rumpled suit, shuffled to the witness stand, avoiding Jamal's gaze. Under Jamal's questioning, guided by notes meticulously prepared with Miss Clara, Grayson admitted to receiving Letitia's letters, but claimed the repairs were too costly. "It's an old building," he muttered, shrugging. "Tenants have to deal with some wear and tear. That's just how it is." Jamal seized the moment, his voice rising with conviction. "Your Honor, Mr. Grayson couldn't afford to fix the apartment. He shouldn't be renting it out. The law says he has to provide a safe place to live. He didn't, and that's why we're here. My mom and my siblings deserve better than a home that's falling apart." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, a wave of support swelling from the gallery. Judge Brooks banged his gavel, calling for order. He looked at Jamal, then at Letitia, whose eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his tone softer now, "do you have anything to add?" Letitia stood, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. "Your Honor, all I want is a safe home for my kids. I didn't want to fight like this, but I had to protect them. Jamal, he's been my rock through all this. I didn't know he was doing all this research, but I'm so proud of him. He's fighting for our family." Judge Brooks leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of contemplation. The courtroom held its breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on every soul in the room. "This is one of the most unusual cases I've ever presided over," he said, his voice measured but carrying a quiet awe. "Jamal, your initiative is nothing short of remarkable. Your arguments are compelling, and the evidence you presented supports your claims. However, the law requires a licensed attorney for formal representation. I'm appointing a public defender to review your mother's case and ensure all procedures are followed. I'm appointing a public defender to review your mother's case and ensure all procedures are followed." He paused, and a rare smile broke across his weathered face, softening the lines etched by years of stern rulings. "But I'll tell you this, young man, you've got the makings of a fine lawyer. Your courage and preparation are extraordinary. Keep studying, and one day you might stand here as a licensed attorney arguing cases with the best of them." Turning to Mr. Grayson, the judge's tone hardened, his eyes narrowing. "Mr. Grayson, the evidence suggests you failed in your duties as a landlord. The photos and letters paint a clear picture of neglect. I'm ordering an immediate inspection of the property and a temporary stay on the eviction. Mrs. Carter, you'll need to deposit the withheld rent into an escrow account pending the outcome of this case." The gavel struck, its sharp crack echoing like a thunderclap. The courtroom exploded in applause, a wave of cheers rising from the gallery. Jamal turned to his mother and threw his arms around her. Letitia sobbed into his shoulder, her tears a mix of relief, pride, and gratitude. The onlookers, many from the Carters' neighborhood, stood and clapped, their voices a chorus of support for the boy who'd taken on the system and won a reprieve for his family. As the bailiff cleared the room, reporters from local news stations crowded the hallway, their cameras flashing as they shouted questions at Jamal and Letitia. A woman from the Jackson Clarion Ledger scribbled furiously, already crafting the headline that would soon read, "10-year-old defends mom in court, stuns judge." Jamal, overwhelmed but composed, held his mother's hand tightly, his notebook still tucked under his arm. The story of Jamal's courtroom stand spread like wildfire, igniting conversations across Jackson and beyond. By evening, news vans lined the courthouse steps, their satellite dishes gleaming under the Mississippi sun. Reporters clamored for interviews, their microphones thrust toward Jamal as he emerged with Letitia, still clutching his notebook. Local headlines blazed, "Boy shocks judge with legal prowess," and "Little lawyer takes on landlord." On X, hashtag Jamal the Lawyer trended nationwide, with users sharing clips of the story and posting messages of support. "This kid's a hero," one user wrote. "He's proof you don't need money or power to fight for what's right." The story resonated deeply in Jackson's underserved communities, where tenants often faced similar battles with unresponsive landlords. Community members began sharing their own stories on X, tagging Jamal and calling for reform. A local organization, Justice for Jackson, launched a fundraiser to cover the Carters' legal fees and help repair their apartment. Donations poured in, not just from Mississippi, but from across the country, as people were moved by Jamal's courage. A single mother in Chicago sent $20 with a note, "For Jamal, who reminds me to keep fighting for my kids." A retired teacher in Seattle donated $100, writing, "This boy is an inspiration." Miss Clara, the librarian who'd guided Jamal's research, beamed with pride when she saw the news. She nominated him for a National Youth Leadership Award, writing a heartfelt letter about his determination, intellect, and heart. Jamal Carter is proof that knowledge is power and that a child's voice can change the world, she wrote. His school held a special assembly in his honor, the gymnasium packed with students, teachers, and parents. When Jamal took the stage, his classmates chanted his name, their cheers echoing off the cinder-block walls. Mrs. Thompson, fighting back tears, presented him with a certificate for outstanding courage and scholarship, her voice cracking as she spoke. The impact reached far beyond Jackson. Sarah Mitchell, a civil rights attorney based in Atlanta, saw the story on the evening news and felt a pull she couldn't ignore. She drove 6 hours to Jackson, arriving at the Carters' apartment with a briefcase full of legal books and a warm smile. Over coffee at their small kitchen table, surrounded by the hum of a newly donated space heater, she offered pro bono representation for Letitia's case. Turning to Jamal, she said, "You've started something big, young man. The law needs people like you, people who fight for justice no matter the odds." She handed him a stack of advanced legal texts and invited him to shadow her at her firm during school breaks, promising to mentor him as he pursued his dreams. Jamal's siblings caught the spark of his ambition. Aaliyah, his 8-year-old sister, declared she'd become a judge to make things fair for everyone. She pored over Jamal's notebook, peppering him with questions about terms like precedent and jurisdiction, her eyes wide with curiosity. Malik, his 6-year-old brother, began writing stories about their family struggles, his pencil scratching late into the night as he crafted tales of heroes who fought against injustice. Letitia, inspired by her son's courage, enrolled in night classes to become a paralegal. "If my boy can take on a judge," she said, her voice firm with resolve, "I can learn something new to provide for my kids." 6 months later, the Carters' case reached its conclusion in a second courtroom hearing, this time with Sarah Mitchell at the helm. The evidence Jamal had gathered, those meticulously organized letters and photos, formed the backbone of Sarah's case. She argued passionately, citing the same Mississippi statutes Jamal had uncovered, her voice steady and commanding. Mr. Grayson, visibly chastened, offered little defense, his earlier bluster deflated by the weight of the evidence. The new judge, a younger woman named Judge Elena Torres, ruled decisively in Letitia's favor. Mr. Grayson was ordered to complete all repairs within 30 days, from sealing the leaky pipes to replacing the faulty wiring. The court also waived 2 months of back rent as compensation for the family's hardship and mandated a 6-month rent reduction, acknowledging the apartment's prior uninhabitable state. As the ruling was read, Letitia reached for Jamal's hand, squeezing it tightly, her eyes brimming with tears of relief. The Carters returned to an apartment transformed. The ceilings were free of water stains, the heater hummed reliably, and the electrical outlets no longer sparked. The space, once a battleground, now felt like a sanctuary, a testament to their resilience and Jamal's courage. Neighbors stopped by with homemade meals and words of encouragement, their smiles a reminder of the community's unwavering support. Jamal's life took on a new rhythm. Sarah became a mentor, guiding him through complex legal texts and inviting him to observe court cases in Atlanta. During one visit, he sat in on a tenant rights case, his pen flying across his notebook as Sarah argued before a packed courtroom. Afterward, she took him to lunch at a small diner where they discussed landmark cases like Brown v. Board of Education and Gideon v. Wainwright. "You're a natural, Jamal," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "Keep this up and you'll be unstoppable." At school, Jamal became a quiet but powerful presence. He revived the mock trial club, recruiting kids from his neighborhood, kids who, like him, had seen their families struggle. They practiced arguments in the school gym, their voices growing bolder with each session. Mrs. Thompson helped Jamal apply for a scholarship to a prestigious summer law camp, where he spent 2 weeks learning about constitutional law and meeting young advocates from across the country. He returned with a new journal, its pages already filling with notes on civil rights law and tenant protections. Justice for Jackson, inspired by Jamal's story, launched a tenant rights workshop series, inviting him to speak at the inaugural event. He stood nervously before a crowd of adults, tenants, activists, and even a few local lawyers, his voice trembling at first, but gaining strength. "You don't need to be a lawyer to fight," he said, holding up his now famous notebook. "You just need to know your rights and speak up. No one can take your voice away." The room erupted in applause, and several tenants approached him afterward, their faces lit with hope as they asked for advice. Jamal, though shy, directed them to Sarah or local legal aid, promising to help however he could. Letitia's paralegal studies became a source of joy and purpose. She'd come home from night classes, her backpack heavy with textbooks, and share what she'd learned with Jamal. They'd sit at the kitchen table, debating legal concepts like equals, their laughter filling the apartment. Aliyah and Malik joined in, turning the table into a lively hub of ideas. Aliyah, now dreaming of a judgeship, practiced ruling on imaginary cases, her gavel a wooden spoon. Malik's stories grew more vivid, his heroes now bearing a striking resemblance to his big brother. The community's support never wavered. Local businesses donated school supplies for the Carter kids, and a law firm in Jackson offered Jamal a part-time internship when he turned 16. The apartment building, now under scrutiny from city inspectors, saw improvements across all units as Mr. Grayson faced pressure to comply with housing codes. Jamal's story had sparked a movement, with tenants across Jackson organizing to demand better living conditions. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow through the apartment's newly repaired windows, Jamal sat at the kitchen table with his journals. He flipped through the pages, now a collection of 4 notebooks, each filled with cases, ideas, and dreams. He thought back to that day in court, the weight of Judge Brooks's gaze, the warmth of his mother's hug, the roar of the crowd's cheers. The memory was a fire in his chest, a reminder that his voice, small but mighty, had changed their lives. Jamal knew the road to becoming a lawyer would be long and fraught with challenges. He'd face late nights of study, financial hurdles, and the weight of expectations. But he also knew he was ready. If a little black boy from Jackson could stand before a judge and fight for his family, then no dream was too big, no obstacle too great. Years later, Jamal would look back on this moment as the spark that ignited his career. He'd graduate from law school with honors, return to Jackson, and open a legal aid clinic dedicated to tenant rights. His office, lined with books and photos of his family, would become a beacon for those facing eviction, a place where no one fought alone. He'd hire Letitia as his lead paralegal, her expertise invaluable, and mentor Aliyah as she pursued her dream of becoming a judge. Malik's stories, now published in a local literary magazine, would inspire a new generation to dream big. But in that quiet moment at the kitchen table, under the soft glow of a new lamp, Jamal was still just a boy with a notebook and a dream. He closed his journal, a smile tugging at his lips. He'd faced a judge, moved a community, and given his family hope. And if he could do that at 10, he could do anything.